How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 4 of What If Deku Had King's Powers. And now, before we begin, I would just like to ask you all to please hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm, and also comment down your favorite anime that you've ever watched. Personally, mine's Tokyo Ghoul, and it's basically always been that way, since Tokyo Ghoul's been the first anime I ever watched. So it's kind of biased, but I'd really just like to hear about what all of your favorite animes are. So now, let's begin. Izuku walks into school where he would end up seeing a massive stack of papers lying on his desk. As he would get closer, he would start reading out the names of a bunch of different heroes and their hero agencies. As he would be reading, Aizawa would end up walking up to the podium at the front of the classroom. Class, these are your, what do they call it? Volunteer things. I don't really care. You're just gonna be volunteering at these, hero agencies. I'm so tired. So it's before slumping back down into his sleeping bag and falling asleep, telling everyone that once they're done, just put them on his desk and he'll submit them to Nezu at the end of the day. And after that, they basically just had an entire free day to do whatever they wanted. So by that, Izuku would look through all of them and would end up finding his father's name fairly quickly, as it was All Might after all, starting with a capital A. So finding it easily, he would choose that, would then put his selection paper up at the front desk, before going back to his own desk. Now, from here, the internships basically play out like normal, except Izuku's just getting trained by All Might, and Izumi's getting trained by Gran Torino. The same Nomu Stain fight happens. Todoroki, Izumi, and Ida all fight the Nomu. Not the Nomu, Stain. All fight Stain. Stain gets taken care of. It's Ida gets in the hospital. I think Izumi goes to the hospital as well, all while Izuku is training off in the woods with All Might for the final exam, where All Might would end up spilling out that Izuku's going to be facing off against him in the finals, as what's not to like about the strongest student in all of UA, or in the first years at least, going up against the strongest teacher there as well. So with that, we end up cutting forward a couple weeks as we end up seeing all of the students walk into the classroom. Alright class, today we are going to be doing the final exams. This is going to decide what you're going to be doing for summer training, whether you're going to spend the next 2 weeks outside training and having fun, or the next 2 weeks inside of a classroom catching up with the rest of your classmates. All of the students would kind of just look on, kind of in just complete shock, not wanting to have to go outside or not wanting to be stuck in a classroom for so long. They just did not want that to happen at all. So with that, we end up seeing all of the students go put their hero costumes on, as we see Izuku crack his knuckles before cracking his neck. As this would happen, Izuku would be told he was going up for the last match with Bakugo up against his father, All Might. Izuku would basically just sigh, hoping he would have had a better teammate than Bakugo, as Bakugo clearly wasn't going to be much of help to him at all. Bakugo wasn't going to be much of a team, as Izuku could basically predict this. Bakugo was, how do I say this, just going to be selfish and try to beat All Might all on his own, try to prove to the world he is something to be reckoned with, when in reality he should just try to work with Izuku to take down Bakugo. So as Izuku would be standing there, as all of the matches would go on, we now see Izuku's match up against his father. Both of them would walk into the city as Izuku would stare down the exit, before he would end up laughing to himself. I'd be a fool to try to go to the exit. As well as Bakugo there would also end up being Izumi, as Mineta not being in this class. However, a new student would have jumped up, this being Shinso, due to showing his brainwashing ability and being taken under the wing by Sawa just a bit sooner, he would end up being thrown into this final exam just to see where his skills are at, taking the place of where Mineta was. So with Izumi, Izuku, and Bakugo all there, Suki would know this was probably going to be quite the easy fight. So he would end up jumping up onto the top of a roof, looking for wherever just All Might was. As Izuku would start scanning around, he would end up spotting his father rushing throughout the city, running towards Bakugo, who'd propel himself forward, reaching out his hand with an explosion, about to slam it into All Might's face. However, All Might would end up twisting his fist around, punching All Might full force right across the cheek, as one of Bakugo's teeth would end up chipping out, flying across the city. So All Might would end up laughing towards Bakugo. Bakugo, aren't you a fool? You know better than to attack the number one hero all by yourself. All Might would say in a taunting manner, as Bakugo only shrugged this off, yelling that he was going to beat All Might. As All Might would only just laugh at him. Oh, sure you're gonna beat me. He would end up yelling out, basically turning into some sort of villain, getting into this whole persona. As this was happening, Izuku watched both Bakugo and Izumi struggle to even land a finger on his father. While this was happening, Izuku would end up jumping up, cracking his fingers before stretching out even further. He would yawn to himself. I guess it's finally time to join. He would end up jumping down, catching himself on Chastaful, riding it along before jumping off, using his fingers, guiding it across before it would end up stabbing right through All Might's hand, which had become basically one of Izuku's favorite moves. Right as it would stab through All Might's hand, Izuku would in, grabbing Chastaful, spinning it around his hands, stabbing it right through All Might's chest. Izuku would pull the spear out. He would end up jumping backwards, looking towards his father. You're far weaker than I thought, Dad, Izuku would say, jumping backwards as All Might would go for a punch towards him, only merely missing Izuku by a couple of inches. As both Bakugo and Izumi would take this opportunity, Izumi using One for All in her hands, using full punching All Might across the face as Bakugo would counter this with an explosion on the other side. As All Might would be feeling of this pain, would end up dropping to his legs, about to take off his weights before realizing he wasn't even wearing any weights to begin with. He would end up smiling to himself before shaking his head. You two are lucky Izuku was here, end up saying before disappearing. All of them would end up looking around, wondering where All Might had gone, before he would end up appearing right behind Izuku, going to take him down, right about to wrap his hands around Izuku's stomach. Izuku would end up turning around, elbowing All Might right in the stomach, before Chastaful would end up slashing right across All Might's shoulder, before Izuku would end up splitting it into a massive gaping wound, because of his just ability he had gotten from his true father, King. This being disaster, as this cut would end up exploding into a massive gash with blood pouring out of it. All Might would put his hand over to his shoulder, holding it, wincing in pain. You truly are something, kid. All Might would raise his hand slowly before saying he forfeits, as Izumi, Izuku, and Bakugo would all get the victory. So we now end up cutting forward to see all of the students riding a bus to just the main mountain area where they were going to be doing their summer training camp, where all of the training would go on like normal, just like canon, up until we end up seeing basically the villain attack. This time, both Izuku and Izumi go out looking for Kota, and because of this, they would both end up fighting Muscular. where because Izumi and Izuku are both there, two of the stronger students on Class 1A, or in Class 1A, they would easily take care of Muscular, especially because of the help of Izuku, which as Muscular would grow more and more muscle, all it would take was one slash of Izuku, and this muscle fiber would end up just deteriorating because it would be completely destroyed by disaster. As this would be happening, Izuku would end up walking up to Muscular, knocking him out before he would end up being thrown off the cliff, as he was getting pushed further and further back. With Muscular knocked out, Izuku would place some handcuffs he had around Muscular's arms before going into consoling Kota, saying that everything was fine, and that he was going to be alright, taking him back to the main area, where basically everything would go exactly like canon once again. Izumi would end up seeing Todoroki this time instead of Tokiyami, and Bakugo both being taken through the marbles. However, this is where things alter a little bit from the main storyline. As he would be reaching out towards them, Izumi not reaching them, Izuku's chastful spear would end up reaching them, cutting Dabi's fingers clean off. As the marbles would end up falling, Guardian would end up Chastful would turn into a Guardian, snatching up the marbles. As Dabi, seeing this, would go using his fire, however it wouldn't work at all. The Guardian was almost completely resistant to it, where Dabi would then end up having to retreat along with all of the other villains. Since Izuku now had both Todoroki and Bakugo in his possession, that would mean that the summer training camp wouldn't be ended early, and it would continually have all of the training. However, once all of the students get back to UA, Momo reveals she placed a tracker on one of the Nomus, and due to the fact that they didn't have the risk of one of the villains killing Bakugo, they could go in just guns blazing and take out all of the villains without being very cautious, as they didn't have a student hostage. So we now end up seeing all of the students living in the dorms, watching on at the TV. Izuku, Izumi, Ida, Bakugo, all of them are all staring at the TV, now instead of helping out All Might with his fight against All for One. So with this, we would end up seeing all of the villains all of the heroes surround the villain base, crashing into it and easily taking care of all of them, as anti-cork cuffs would be quickly placed around them due to All Might not worrying about Bakugo. With all of them captured, they would quickly be placed into an anti-cork cop car, which would take them away before All for One could even react. And once he did, he would end up arriving through there, going through its portal, going to attack All Might, before he would be restrained by Endeavor, who would end up being broken away. However, Endeavor would scorch both All for One's arms, which wouldn't quickly heal like he had hoped. This would cause All Might to jump in, punching All for One right across the face, slamming him into the ground. This would weaken All for One so severely that he basically couldn't fight anymore. So weak, he would end up having to forfeit the match and just give up. So with him forfeiting the match and just now gone out of, or not forfeiting the match, he would end up having to give up, knowing that his only hope now was to escape prison. He wasn't going to be able to beat all of these heroes. There was just hundreds of them surrounding him. There was little to no chance. However, before this could happen, the doctor would end up showing up, saving the day. Nomu scouring throughout, causing all these hundreds of heroes to have to take on a Nomu each by themselves. So we now end up seeing All for One and All Might fight against each other, both of them weakened due to injuries they had sustained years before, as this fight would go similar to canon, both of them trading blow for blow, and All Might giving one last super punch towards All For One. However, because All For One is already so weak, he would end up basically being killed by All Might's attack on accident, and because of the threat All For One posed, there would be no repercussions on the now retiring All Might. And due to this fight, Endeavor taking over #1 hero status, as all of the students would be gathered around the TV, watching, just so intrigued, it just quite shocked how all of them could just be, how all of this could happen so quickly, as All For One, dead, Shigaraki, and the rest of the League of Villains would basically just kind of be lost, not sure where to go. So with that, we cut forward a couple months, just full of training and this and that, all of stuff that, where we now end up seeing all of the students lined up to get their hero licenses, and all of this training and just having a newfound respect for each other, as all of them would have passed the finals except for some few, and all of them just protecting each other, especially Bakugo and Todoroki having a newfound respect for Izuku, who had saved them. They would end up working together instead of splitting up during the hero licensing, taking down all of the classes or all of the schools that would come at them, and they would fly through the quirk licensing exams, easily taking hold of them, and all of the students would end up passing it with flying colors. Now, with all of the students just having, with now all of these students having their licenses, they would end up as well taking on another challenge. And this challenge would come in the face of their gym class during their second day with their licenses, as now with their licenses, they could fully use their quirks. As if anyone got injured with their quirks on campus, it would be UA's responsibility, but now it isn't, so they can go pretty much all out. However, they had to still be monitored. So this is where we see the Class 3A versus Class 1A go up against each other. Well, rather just the big three against Class 1A. Now, this would go pretty much the exact same up until Izuku, Bakugo, Todoroki, and Izumi would all be left standing. Todoroki would use his ice, however, Mirio would end up phasing through it, punching him right in the stomach. Bakugo would launch towards Mirio, hoping to try to protect Todoroki, however, Mirio would dodge an explosion, punching Bakugo right in the stomach. Izumi and Izuku would be left, as Izumi would go full Cowling, rushing towards him, dodging Mirio's phase through attack before going to punch Mirio himself in the stomach. However, this would be phased through and would be punched in the back. This would leave just Izuku versus Mirio. As the two would stand staring at each other, they would all wonder what was about to happen, as Izuku would end up asking Mirio to go for the first attack. Mirio would rush towards Izuku, however, his punch would be blocked by a guardian standing before him. As this guardian would go to reach down, grabbing Mirio's fist, however, Mirio would phase through it, going to punch Izuku from the back. However, the guardian would reappear there as well, blocking this punch. As Izuku, sensing the guardian was going to be too slow moving, he would turn it back into a pillow, blocking all of Mirio's punches as it would quickly be zooming around, blocking it, tiring out Mirio along with Izuku, who's just dragging it around as fast as he could, trying to block the quick-footed Mirio's attacks. So, as Izuku and Mirio would both get increasingly tired, Izuku would end up jumping back, going in for an attack, using just full as he would race towards Mirio, going to stab him through the chest. However, Mirio would phase through this, as he would continue to phase through all of Chastiful's attacks. Before Izuku would turn it back into a pillow, as Mirio's punch would end up being blocked once again. Aizawa would end up walking in, before saying that this match was going nowhere. It had been 30 minutes already, and there was no decided victor. And that would decide the match. It would end in a tie. Mirio would look towards Izuku, or putting a fist out, as both of them would bump their fists together, before Mirio would end up saying, "In a month from now, I want a rematch. Got it?" "We'll see who wins then," Izuku would say. And that is where part 4 of What If Deku Had King's Powers comes to an end. I hope you all did enjoy it, and if you did, please consider subscribing, as it really does help this channel out, and you can even be notified when the other parts of this video do end up coming out. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.